Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Juan Vargas. Thanks for being on the show, Juan.
Hey, Whitney, it's a pleasure to be on your show, man. I've listened to your episodes and your show, and man, you can put out a lot of great content, and you have a lot of good guys on your show, and man, it's an honor to be on your show. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
No, I'm honored to have you on the show. It's been great to see your growth and you know, things you're doing in the marketplace and you know, different properties and what you've accomplished quickly. And we're going to get into some of that and looking forward to it. But a little about Juan. He started in multifamily in 2016 with a 32 unit acquired via direct mail. That's interesting as well. And passive investor in 1,100 units, GP in 600 units, totaling 1,700 units. He's closing on a deal this week on 200 plus units in Phoenix. So congratulations to you, Juan. That's a great accomplishment there. I know that's exciting. And but tell the listeners, in case they haven't heard of you, tell them, you know, a little about you and tell them about your syndication business, you know, what you all are doing right now, and let's dive in.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that introduction. So, you know, as you mentioned, you know, I did get my start in multifamily in 2016. You know, that was with a 32 unit, you know, and so, you know, some people have asked me, why direct mail, and simple, you know, calling brokers didn't work for me. So I had to, you know, just kind of take it through my own hands and do it that way. So I read a couple of books and I was like, okay, that's enough, you know, right there. So let's take action. And, you know, 6 months after, you know, I educated myself, quote unquote, educated myself, you know, I acquired a 32 unit. Since then, as you mentioned, you know, I have invested in some deals. So 1,100 units passively, with also some 600 units apart from those 1,100 units that I'm a GP in. And as you mentioned as well, you know, 200 plus unit that we're closing on in Phoenix this week. And so, you know, things have worked out, you know, well. I'm very fortunate, and you know, it's all about teamwork, you know, and I got to give a lot of the success is due to a team that I've been, you know, be able to surround myself with.
Nice. So I appreciate that. And, you know, and we were talking before we started recording just about your specialty or your role in this team. And, you know, and that team is so important. We've talked about it numerous times. It's the importance of that team, and that's how you're going to get places faster and make sure you're doing it correctly, right? Everybody kind of knows their role and can specialize and improve, and, you know, because they're not having to focus on everything, right? And getting everything done halfway, you know, they can actually do something really well. And kind of your role in this team is the asset managing, or part of your role, we'll say. I know you do lots of things, but I'd love for us to elaborate on just the asset management side of the business, and, you know, from beginning to end, and maybe you can kind of get us started. And, you know, as far as, you know, having that asset manager hat on, you know, knowing, okay, this is going to be my specific duty, you know, for the team, you know, after we close. You know, let's start back though, you know, when we were first starting to look at this property, maybe even through the due diligence, you know, process and some of that. We don't have to elaborate in depth about due diligence specifically, but unless it's, you know, something you need to know, which most of it is, but most of it you need to know, right, when you're going to asset manage. But help us to think through that process of, you know, when we're first looking at properties, you know, getting to the closing table, and then let's go specifically after closing as well. You know, when that's your role, what should we be doing?
Yeah. So I would say, you know, before, you know, my first couple of deals were, I actually got into the GP side by assisting with the equity, right? So I was, you know, equity, right? So I just want to clarify that up front. You know, so there's multiple ways to get into the GP side. You know, I do want to say, so, you know, just figure out what your skill set is. And sometimes you don't know what that is, but you'll learn it, right? You'll learn what you're good at and what you're not good at. And so my entry, you know, into GP side was through capital, right? Raising capital. So that's one of the ways. But my focus now is on asset management. So you pretty much, you know, asked me, you know, what's kind of like the role, you know, what you do. So, you know, first of all, you know, as far as, you know, finding the opportunity, you got to find the opportunity. You find the opportunity, you get it under the contract, right? What we've been able to do, you know, on some of our deals is actually build in a early access, you know, agreement or early access period into the contract. And so what that has been able to help us do is we're actually able to go in there in, 7 days. We're actually able to go in there and do a lot of the due diligence within those first 7 days before, if you have hard money, before your hard money goes, hard, day 8 or whatever that is. That's the way we've been able to structure our agreements. And so during those 7 days, you want to, have access to the property. You want to be able to go into the property and go into the units, take a team with you, so have the roofers, electricians, plumbers, all those kind of guys. Also, your property management team can also help you out with doing their lease audits, doing their own survey, and also getting, some of the budget and the pro forma put together and buttoned down. So that's kind of what we do, just to help us eliminate some of that risk up front. And if it's something that we find out that is not worth going or moving forward with, then it's easy. We just walk away and hey, it didn't work out at the end. If it does, then we're able to move forward and, our money goes hard, day 8. So that's kind of the way we started, right?
I think that's some great advice right there. I mean, and I haven't really heard anybody elaborate on that like that or talk about, building in the early access. And I've heard people in the industry maybe mention or talk about it, but not on the show. And so that's great advice. And would you say, do you have that in your LOI, or is that something that's in the contract?
Yeah. So you want to make sure that you put it in the LOI. So like that, whenever you go to finalize the PSA, the seller knows what you were expecting, right? So, every time we're submitting an LOI, we always make sure that we have that early access in there, and so it can vary. We do it for 7 days because a lot of times the seller doesn't want to give you that, right? They're like, why would I allow this guy to be on my property and going through my units and do all this, their own homework. And then they're not really 100% committed at that point, right? So what we do is we put that in there, but we go ahead and wire the money as if we're gonna go ahead and pursue it, right? As if we're gonna for sure, take down this deal. So wire the money. It doesn't go hard though until day 8, but we make sure that we have our attorney put in there. Hey, if we don't feel comfortable with it, we can walk away, and the hard money that's with the title company can be returned to us. So we got to make sure that. We do that because a lot of these deals these days, the reality is that you have to go hard money, and if you're not going hard, then you're not winning anything, and so a lot of people, they don't want to go hard. So you're not winning deals. That's part of the terms, so the price, I think, is the most important, but the terms are right there with it. And then is your track record, who you are and all that good stuff. So, and so we always try to make sure that we every time we submit an offer, we got to make sure that we have that in there,
Now I know you just saved somebody $200,000 right there. So thanks for talking about that. Because it is very important. I love that tip that you put out there, and getting that time agreed upon that you can do an inspection, and hopefully the sellers cooperate, right? And let you in and provide access and those things. And so, you're not one to waste your time either, right? I mean, it's costing a lot of time and money for you to come do that early due diligence like that. So, to tell me about that team though, that you have ready, to come in with you, because you want them there, right? I mean, you want them coming in those units and giving you some really solid advice on what needs to be done, right? What are we going to have to do going forward, and what's the cost going to be? And so, who's that team, and what are their roles?
Yeah. So, before you're able to do that, hopefully you were able to get like an operating budget, to do your pro forma, and see if the numbers work out on the deal, first of all. And usually that's a property manager, right? So reach out to a property manager, somebody that's well known, somebody that manages properties that are similar to the property that you want to acquire. So if you're looking at a C deal, then they'll look for a manager, right? They're going to be useless for you, right? Vice versa. If you're looking at a B plus deal, don't look for a manager that does C deals, right? You got to find somebody that fits exactly what the kind of product that you're looking for. I think it's very, very important. A lot of people, they see managers and as, somebody that can manage a property regardless of what kind of property you have. And I don't think so. I think, there's C managers, and there's managers that focus, and that's their strength, that's their bread and butter. And then there's B managers, and that's their bread and butter. Yes, some of those may interchange. It might do B and C, but they're going to focus on one asset class versus the other more, right? So that's what we do, right? So we try to find that manager that kind of fits, and we look at the portfolio, we interview them, we do all that good stuff, and then we tell them, hey, we're about to get this property under contract. We have this LOI that's about to be accepted or whatever. Those kind of things, just to prepare them and have them ready. And then so apart from that, because they're usually going to handle like your lease audits. They're going to be on site. They're going to be doing a lot of that, right? But you still need somebody to go in there and check out your roof, and then check out your plumbing, your electrical, your units. Your units is usually going to be your manager, but you still want a team to go in there and do all that, right? So, and all that is going to cost you. So, that's, you're still going to have to put some money in, and it's going to cost you. If you walk away from the deal, you're still going to have spent, some of that money. And if you don't pay for, if you don't move forward with the property, then you still have to pay your property manager for their due diligence costs. Usually they'll take care of it, and will do it for free if you move forward with the property and if you are to use them, if not, then you have to write a check, for their services. It's not for free either, so, so those are the people that you want to have really on the property ready to go. As soon as you sign that, then, bring them on and have them ready.
I like how you're talking about having a management team who's used to managing this class of property. And I think that's misunderstood a lot in the industry, or especially if you haven't had many units, or you see a company who's very well established, but if you start looking at their other properties, they look really nice, right? But they're all Class A, like you mentioned. And is this team ready to do, maybe the property that you're looking at is a big reposition or a very heavy lift, in a very hard part of town, is this team ready for this type of turnover, or this type of management, intense management time. And the management team is so crucial. I appreciate you elaborating on that. And then, having that plumber and electrical or electrician and those managers come in, at having them ready at that same time, so you can just maximize that window, right? Those few days that you have, and just gather all this information before that 8th day, right?
Yeah. I think it's very, very critical and very important, and if everything, if all the reports come back and it's checks all the way through, then you feel good about it. Then you move forward. Day A comes around, or whatever day you negotiated, then you feel good about it, and it's good, right? So, yeah, it's very important to have those people ready to go for you, and do the homework, and the earlier the better, because usually it'll take them 2, 3, 4 days sometimes to get back with you on those reports. So if you're bringing those guys in on day 5, then you already lost 5 days. You want to bring those guys in day 1, day 2, and then by the time you get to day 5, day 6, you already know what the reports say and what the property looks like. And then you have a couple of days still to digest it and make your final decision, and then move forward.
Awesome. So before we move to like closing, after closing, what you're going to do as asset manager, at that time you're talking about, you're going to get them in there that second or third day, so you can have time to get those reports in. But before that time, you're going to have to understand kind of your parameters are very well, right? So when you get those reports, you can quickly make that decision and figure out, does this work? Does it not? Are there a couple of things you could share with us that those reports might tell you that are going to say, wait a minute, no, this is not going to work. We need to call this off, right now.
Yeah. So some of those could be like major physical, challenges on the property, right? So sometimes you don't see, you can see a roof. If it's a pitched roof, you can see it, right? So, you can see if it's going to need to be replaced, just by walking the property, right? You don't have to necessarily get up on top and see if it's really damaged. A lot of times you can see it from just walking the property, but sometimes there's some things that you cannot see, right? So for example, if you're working on a chiller property, let's say, if it's a chiller property. So a chiller, for those of you guys that don't know what that is, it's just like one big AC unit, right, that runs the whole property. So there's it's got pipes that go underneath the ground, and it dumps water, and it does whatever. I'm no expert in it, but it pretty much cools the whole property, right? So but it's one chiller for the entire property versus individual HVACs, where you have each HVAC is controlling each unit. And so sometimes some of those things you're not an expert in that, so you want to get those guys to go out there. And if it's something that's really, really expensive, where they say, hey, this thing has no life left in it, then you have to kind of look back and say, hey, either A, we retrade on this deal, because these chillers could cost you, $100,000 plus, $200,000 plus, and that's a big, CapEx item that you may not have budgeted for, right? So that's one thing for sure. And so you have A, you either retrade on the property, or B, you're like, hey, it's not going to work. I'm just going to walk away from the property at this point, because we didn't budget for this. Now the numbers, if I account for 200 grand more, my numbers don't work anymore, right? So, those kind of things is something that you should, look for, and they're going to give you those reports, and they're going to give you their best opinion, right? Because they're experts, but they're going to give you their best opinion, because there's always an opinion, right? And so that's one thing. The other thing is maybe on the lease audits, right? Whenever you have your property management doing the lease audits, then you're able to find out, hey, some of these tenants are maybe they're Section 8 tenants, and we didn't realize that they were Section 8 tenants, or some of these are, a lot of these are month to month, and there's no real contract in place, those kind of things. So it's once you start doing renovations, you start, changing the property around, a lot of people can go, which can be a good thing, but can also be a bad thing, right? So your occupancy can dip, severely. But a lot of times, the kind of properties that we look for, we're okay with those people, heading out, because we want to, turn those units anyways, and get better quality people in there anyway. So, I mean, those are some of the things that you want to look for. Obviously, survey, that I'm no expert in that, but, survey, that's an issue. Sometimes, if it doesn't come out, or, the seller doesn't, approve of the existing survey, then sometimes you have to get a new survey, and there's a lot of things that go to that. But you want to look as much as you can. So on a property that we have, there's aluminum wiring. It's something that we didn't realize that it had aluminum wiring. So that could be a deal killer for some people, right? So, but for us, it was just a couple of buildings, and that's something that you can take care of anyways. So aluminum wiring, for those of you that don't know, it's a little trickier, because the aluminum, can cause, is more hazardous to fires, right? So, it can overheat and cause fires, whereas a lot of the newer properties are copper wiring, and so they're more safe, so those are some of the things that you got to look for. I mean, obviously you should know a lot of these things, or try to know a lot of these things as much as you can, beforehand, but some of this is going to come up during due diligence.
So is aluminum wiring specifically something you're going to shy away from? You're going to say, oh no, I don't want that property because of that? Or is that something you see value where you can create value?
Yeah. So a lot of people are going to shy away from that. I'm not saying that I'm looking for, properties that have aluminum wiring, because that's my value add, at all. But, a lot of the properties will have those, and those are typically found on the older properties, say, 50s, 60s, 70s, something like that. Once you get older or newer from there, then typically they'll use copper wiring. But, it can cost some pretty good, amount, of CapEx, depending on the size of the property, to what they call a pigtail, right? You got to pigtail those, and pretty much what it is you're changing a little piece. You're adding a little piece to it from where the aluminum wiring to copper is kind of the way it is, to kind of prevent, or reduce the possibility of any fire, right? So, and those are approved by Fannie and Freddie, so that kind of repair is approved by them, because, the reality is you can't go in there and change all the aluminum wiring, some people do, but it's very, very costly, so Fannie and Freddie will say, hey, as long as you do these repairs, then we're good. We approve of that, so, but those are some of the things that you got to look for, during due diligence. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So, before we run out of time, I want us to jump to, closing, after closing, maybe some things that, as you're managing these properties after closing, things that we should be thinking about, that we are doing, even on a monthly or weekly basis, those meetings we should be having, things we should be discussing.
Yeah. Yeah. So we always have weekly calls, with our managers. We don't self-manage our properties. We have third-party property management companies that manage the properties for us, and we want to make sure that we have calls, every single week. Because you got to look over all the numbers. You got to look over the KPIs, the numbers. What's going on with the property? What are we doing? What are we renovating? Why are we not doing this? What's working? What's not working? Right. So, every Tuesday is kind of when we do our calls, and that works out best for us. Right. So. And during those calls, you want to, like, as I said, talk about the reports, right? Talk about the number of units that you renovated. How much were we able to get? What did it cost us? Because a lot of it is testing. It's, whenever you put your performer out there, you're assuming that if you do these kind of repairs or renovations, you're going to get this kind of rent. But whenever you actually do the renovations, that's not always the case. It can be worse or it can be better, right? For us, fortunately, it's been better. And maybe the economy, maybe the opportunity that we found, but it's been better with less capital that we actually put into these units. So, those are the kind of things you want to do. As far as leads, that's very important because, is a lot of it is lead retention, your tenant retention. You gotta try to make sure that you keep your tenants, because that costs you a lot of money whenever you do turnover. When you have a turnover, that's a lot of money wasted, because then now you got to market the new people, the unit sitting vacant, those kind of things. So it's very important that, you keep track on what's going on with your existing tenants. And then your new tenants, where are they coming from? What's the traffic look like? Did we close on this lead or not? So those are the kind of calls, and those are the kind of, things that you have to discuss on these calls, apart from being at the property, right? So you got to go be at the property, as much as you can. If you're local, then that's good. You could be there, once every couple of weeks or something like that, right? You don't have to be there every single week either. But if you're not local, you want to be there at least, once or twice a month, and if you have a team, maybe you could take turns, and, everybody kind of be there once a month or something like that, right? So you always got to stay on top of that, because the truth is they're not going to be watching over your property unless they know that you are serious about it, and they know that you're on top of them, otherwise they're going to take it easy.
Awesome. So some great things there that we need to be talking to our property management company about, right? And you said you all are doing it on a weekly basis, which is great. Anything else that might come up during that call that you need to address at that time? Anything else they might bring to you that maybe somebody that's not doing this yet may not realize that they're going to have to talk about or be prepared for?
Yeah. So one of the things, and I'm gonna give this credit to Neil Bawa. And for a lot of your listeners, I'm sure they know who he is. So I listened to his a podcast that he was on, and he spoke about this. So he spoke about hiring some VAs to help with lead generation, right? So your property manager is gonna do their best job. This is his words, and I'm not it's not quote for a quote, but the property manager is going to do their best job to get people on to your property. But the reality is that it's only going to be a handful of people, right? So it's only going to be one or two people, or maybe three at most, depending on the size of the property, that are going to be doing that. And so he hires VAs from the Philippines to do calls, to create leads, to bring them to the property. Now, he's not replacing the manager at all, but he's assisting, and so he pretty much is doubling down. And so he's bringing leads from the manager, bringing leads from his VAs, and is working together. And those are the kind of things that these days, you have to find out every single opportunity that you can find, because the reality is that a lot of these properties are overpriced. And so if you're going to pay a little bit more, then maybe you think it is worth, you want to get to a property. I'm not saying to overpay, but the reality is a lot of people are overpaying. You got to find out every single opportunity that you can do to the property to create those revenue streams, because that goes to the bottom line, right? So I'm gonna give him all the credit in the world, because I heard that from him, and I thought that was just genius, man. That guy is he's very really intelligent and smart, and the way he manages his properties. So I took that page from his book, 100% from his book. So I thought that was very clever.
Yes, I've heard him talk about it. We've had him on the show. We've talked about using virtual assistants and some of the things he's done, just like you were talking about. He'll hire them to do Facebook ads and ads on Craigslist and things like that. So the management team's not doing that, but he's helping direct leads, to his property, or to their ads and things like that, assisting them and at a really low cost, considering, increasing the income substantially. So no, I appreciate you bringing him up, but I would encourage listeners to go back and listen to a couple shows that he and I both have done on using virtual assistants, and some really neat things he's done to improve the income. And so, what would you say has been the hardest part in this syndication journey for you?
Yeah. So, at the very beginning, I started with 32 unit, right? And the reason why I started with the 32 unit is because I didn't know anything about syndication. I didn't even know what syndication was. Like, that word didn't even exist to me at that moment, right? So, I acquired the 32 unit, and it was a great property. And from there, once I started learning about syndication, it was still a little bit of a fear. I still had a little bit of a fear, because these are, if you're going to do a syndication, these are larger properties, right? Why would you want to syndicate it if you can just take it down yourself, right? So you're syndicating these properties because they're usually larger properties, and there's a lot of moving pieces into it, right? So, my fear was, would I do it right? What's going to go on? There's so many moving pieces. Am I going to be capable of doing this? But once you start learning about it more, and you surround yourself with a good team, that has different skill sets, then it becomes so much easier, right? And you have, maybe a mentor or something like that kind of helps guide you. Then everything becomes, so much easier and it falls into place. Not saying that they do it for you, but it just becomes that much easier, right? So, first of all, I would say it was a mindset kind of thing. So once you get over that, then things fall into place.
So what's a way that you have or your team has recently improved your syndication business that we could all apply to ours as well?
Yeah. So I would say that, really using systems, that's one of the best ways, using systems, networking, continue the networking, continue to get out there and know, or be known. Because if you're not known, I mean, that's the reality is, it's hard for people that want to do business with you. Right. So that's some of the things, but going back to systems, we use Dropbox, and this is something like 101, right? I would say, but it's very important that you use that because you don't want to have files all over the place, and you want to be more organized. So we use Dropbox and Google Drive. I mean, those things have been like lifesavers for us because we share those and we have all the files and everything's organized and it keeps us in place. So there's other resources that I don't personally use yet, but I have used them with other groups, and so that is Slack. That's a very good resource that we want to start to implement, and it's easy to use and it's so much more. I think it's so much more beefy than like using regular email or something like that, right? So those are some of the things that you want to use. Just systems and also like I said, networking, getting out there as much as you can to as many events as you can, because the reality is, as I said earlier, if people don't know who you are, then it's going to be hard for people to do business with you.
So how do you or your team prepare for another downturn?
Yeah, so we are being conservative, and everybody says that, and I've seen people, people's underwriting and other deals, and I'm like, man, that's conservative. I'm like, that's not conservative at all. That's actually aggressive in my eyes. So what we always do is look at the historicals, right? So we look at, we use CoStar, Yardi, some of those reports, and we look at the historicals. And then from there, we see, okay, what was the worst here? What happened the worst? What was the worst economic vacancy that this property had or this submarket had or this star properties had? Like, so if we're looking at a 2-star or 3-star property, then what was the worst, it got here? What was the worst cap rate that it got? And so we try to model those, numbers, and if we're at those numbers, and this is, when I say worst, this was like 08, 09, when it really, everything dropped off the cliff. So if we're modeling those numbers as far as like a reversion cap, or an economic vacancy, and we're checking that out and the numbers work out, even there, then we feel good about that. Right. So, for example, Phoenix is having, like, you can argue is the highest rent growth in the nation right now, right there neck and neck with Vegas, and some other markets. Right. So it's not uncommon for them to get, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8% rent growth year over year the last few years, right? And so, we're not modeling that. Of course not. We'd be crazy if we were that, right? So we're doing 2%, right? 2% all the way through. If the numbers work out, great. The numbers worked out, like in this case, in the deal that we have, then and great, we're good, right? So that's the kind of ways that we try to be conservative. Is look at the historicals, because the historicals are going to dictate that. And a lot of people, they look back, maybe a couple years, 2, 3, 4 years. I'm thinking that's okay, but the market has gone up since then. So you want to look at the historicals, maybe, after 5 years, 6, 7 years, 8 years, how did it look then? Let's model that and see if numbers still work.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what's one thing that's contributed to your success? If you could say that, this one thing has just really been instrumental.
Yeah. So I would say, action. That's the simple, and it sounds so simple, but really, like the 32 unit, I keep going back to that, but the 32 unit, I read a couple books and I was like, man, I was so pumped up and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And if you allow thoughts to creep into your head, then you don't take action because you're like, oh, what if this goes wrong? What if I don't do this right? What if I lose money? And so if you allow those thoughts to get into your head, then you're not going to take action and then nothing ever happened. And so for me, I learned a lot on that deal and also made money on it, which is the best part, right? But it wouldn't have happened if I didn't take action. I'll tell you a quick story real quick. And I know we're kind of running out of time, but, this weekend I was at an event, right? And so there was a guy that was, he put me to the side, right? So it was a Quest IRA event. I'm not gonna name his name, hopefully he's not listening to the show, but, so he put me to the side and he's like, man, can I go talk to you? And I was like, yeah, sure. He was like, man, there's so many different things that are out there, man. Like, so you got flips, you got, private money lending, you got, notes, you got, multifamily, you got self-storage, so many different things. I don't know what to do. Can you give me some advice on what you think, I should do? And I'm like, hey, so what are your goals? Tell me what your goals are. And then, maybe I can help you from there. He's like, well, I like multifamily, you're an expert in multifamily, and I gave him all the pros and cons about multifamily and why you should do multifamily. And then he was still like, but like, man, I still like notes. I still like this. I still like that. And then I asked him, so what do you do for a living? Tell me, what do you do for a living? And he's like, well, I'm an engineer. And then I was like, you know what? You're thinking with your engineer hat on right now. You're trying to overanalyze everything. You need to stop doing that and just focus on one, and you remove the hat and just focus on one and move forward. And he was like, man, nobody's ever told me that. You're right. I am overanalyzing it. and he did that. And he's like, you know what? Let's have lunch this week. I want to sit down and talk about multifamily only. And that's it. So sometimes we just overanalyze and overthink things.
Nice. Great advice. So Juan, great interview. I really appreciate your time. And unfortunately we're out of time, but tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about your business.
Yeah. So they can reach out to me at Juan@GenWealthCapital.com. That's Juan@GenWealthCapital.com. I'm happy to talk to anybody that's, learning or, wants to learn more about multifamily investing, and I'm all over social media as well. So people can reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, wherever, LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.